So I'm assuming that once you decided that you were going to up the rigor, include more writing, and making more critical thinking questions, the students just soared, and it came very easily to them.
Actually, it was the exact opposite. Midway through our unit, we found out that our students, and if we had thought about this before, we would have realized this would have predictably happened, were not prepared to write constructive responses. Because this is the focus for so many years has been on the I in writing. What do you think? Here's a topic. Should we have school uniforms? What do you think? Well, now it's about read a text, look at the text, make a claim, and support that claim with the text. Well, our students have never been asked to do that, and so we had to say, wait a minute, our assessment's good, our assessment is doing what is valid, it's reliable, it's what we want to assess. The problem is there's no instruction to back up the assessment. So we had to go back and completely rethink and reteach, or actually not reteach, but to actually teach dedicated teaching of how to do a constructive response.
Based on the assessment that you gave.
Exactly.
Okay. So
just to give you an idea, I have 4 classes. I have 31 gifted students. I had 1A out of 4 classes. Wow. So clearly there was a disconnect. Okay.
So sort of walk us through the instruction you provided to teach them about constructive response.
Well, we put together basically a PowerPoint about what it means to do a constructive response. And we call it How to Succeed with the New Standards. Keep that in mind because this isn't easy.
Right.
So the first thing we had to do is that to make them understand there are some simple steps. And I like the word simple because we want to make sure that you follow the steps, you're going to be able to do this. So there are simple steps that can be taken to construct a short answer question, a response to a short answer question. Then we, first of all, want to make sure they understood what the difference was between a short answer question, constructive response, and an extended response. And we looked at things like, well, in a short answer, constructive response, usually there's 2 facts that you're being asked to do, 2 things you're being asked to do. Extended responses, there may be as many as 4 or 5 things you have to do to show in that essay. All right, so we got.
And I should just go back real quick.
Yes.
The new PARCC assessment, 2014. This is going to be a critical thing to know about. It hasn't. Right now, we've had essay and multiple choice, but now this is going to be the new focus for assessment.
We like to say that we were PARCC before PARCC was cool.
Good.
Because we were actually coming up with these kind of assessments even before we had seen a PARCC example
right.
activity.
But using the language is going to be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And so we had some basics. Assume you've been given a paragraph or short article to read. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. That's what happens daily in your life. That's what's going to happen on the PARCC assessment. Again, we're not focused on that assessment. We're focused on what happens in daily life. But still, if you can do this, you can do it in any situation. So you may be given a prompt like this. Explain a purpose the author may have had in writing this article. Use examples from the text to support your answer. This is a very, very, very exemplary example of the kind of assessment you're going to be faced with
in most of your classes.
From now until ever.
Absolutely.
And even after you get out of your academic, wherever your academic life ends, this is the kind of thing you do in real life.
And what's interesting about this question is, if they answer this question, they are really addressing several standards at once. They're always addressing one. They're also addressing author's purpose. They're addressing several writing standards. Exactly. So by using this type of question, you're assessing several standards.
And as you'll see, when you look at the documents that show our assessments, our questions were pointed towards specific standards. So anyway, we got this particular example. Now we ask them to take a look at that and notice the 2 actions that are being asked for in this response. Explain a purpose the author may have had in writing this article and use examples from the text to support your answers. So we instructed our students, look at those action verbs. That's what you're looking for, the action verbs. That's going to direct you to what your response should look like. All right, then we gave them another prompt. Okay. Again, find the 2 action verbs. All right, explain. Explain is what meant when the poet writes, my imagination stood before me, acted on by 50 years. We actually had the text here in the prompt. Use information from the text to support your answer.
So the 2 action words are explain, so they know they have to explain something, and they know they have to use the information in this text to support their answer.
That's it.
And by having that text in there, it even emphasizes this is going to be a text-based response.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Which is what we're looking for. All right, then we give another example. This one's a little different. It's a little different language. So, what are the actions in this prompt? Describe how the student achieves the outstanding grade by staying focused and determined. Provide examples from personal experience to support your answer. Now, so we're looking at text as well here, but also now we're incorporating in a little personal experience as well for some support. But the key thing is we've got describe and provide examples.
Probably doesn't kill to have this in there, sprinkled in, because the current assessment does still have some of this. So while you're using the other writing assessment the majority of the time, it's probably not going to hurt them to see what they're going to be seeing for the next year or so on the writing.
This year, 7th graders will be taking the middle grade writing test.
Yeah.
Again, there's an example of what they're going to be faced with.
Exactly.
So now we've identified the actions that they have to take. Now it's time to look at a 3-step plan to formulate the answer. And the first thing is to analyze and plan. Well, we do this ordinarily as we're writing, but we want to be sure that since we're writing specifically to some certain actions we're being asked to do, we want to make sure that they understood that terminology.
Sometimes we assume they do, and that's very dangerous.
So and again, it's written in blue, so these students are actually taking notes on these particular items, this particular language. So compare, what does it mean to compare? What does describe mean? Explain.
Would you ever put these words in your word of the day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to find that they actually appeared. All right, so then we continue to evaluate, identify, summarize, support. You know, we actually had that as a word. That was one of our first words of the day. So now they've got the background knowledge for the vocabulary to understand the prompt. So now that we've been able to analyze the prompt, now we need to plan out. So we want to be sure we identify all parts of the question. What are the 2 actions we're going to have to take? And then the planning also comes in with jot list, maybe a T-chart. We don't want an extensive pre-writing that you would have in an essay. We don't have time for that. Most of the time when you do a short response, a constructive response, you're doing more than one. You're doing 2 or 3, maybe as many as 5. And there's only a finite amount of time you're going to have to formulate that answer. So an extensive pre-writing is, you're not going to have time for that. So keep it to a list, like I say, a T-chart if it would be compare and contrast, maybe a Venn diagram if you would compare and contrast, but very brief but to the point.
If students are going to be taking challenging classes in the upper grades and high school AP classes, they're going to need to do timed writing and quick responses to complex text.
All right, so now that we've analyzed and planned, now we're going to write the answer. And then we look at those notes. Organize those notes and thoughts into groups. Because you're going to have to give those 3 pieces of textual evidence. Maybe you can group those notes and thoughts together. Write a 1-sentence summary of your answer. This is the thesis statement. This should be the first sentence of the response. Then write a separate sentence for each piece of textual evidence. We recommend they keep these pretty much as simple sentences, although if they're comfortable with combining related ideas into well-constructed compound and complex sentences, we certainly encourage them to do so. And then we look for a concluding sentence, which would wrap up the response. This is something we're even working on today and working on how to do a proper conclusion. So we've got those things together, and then after we have written those sentences to make that cohesive paragraph, we want to go back and look at it again. Is it coherent? Is it complete? We want to review the answer to be sure that we have answered those 2 parts of the question. We want to be sure that we've got enough details and examples to back up what we said. And then we want to be sure we have some form of conclusion that wraps up the response. So then, after we've been through this lesson, we ask them to do some practice and draw them directly from our anchor text. One of the recurring themes of the Hunger Games is paybacks. List examples of characters who feel as though they owe another character something. Explain how these incidents affect the outcome of the games. And so the first thing the student would do is find the action verbs, list, and explain.
And they have to, state a claim. These are the characters who feel, and it's supported. And looking at all of your assessment questions, They all include that. Now, the question now is going to be, after you reassess, how did they do? Did this work? So we're going to talk to Ms. Dean and see how she gave students feedback and helped them revise.